My name's Reyes. I'm one of the new Team elitefts members. My background is strength sports, so I was fortunate to get a hold of the right people at a very young age. Started to go to the gym when I was like 13, and when I was 16 years old, one of my training partners, Nick Keogh, was telling me that he's like, oh, I do this stuff called Strongman. I train with this guy, Derek Poundstone. He's pretty strong. You should come up and work out with us one time. So I said, okay. I knew nothing about Strongman at all. I'd seen it on TV once or twice, the guys that lift the crazy boulders and stuff like that, and ended up showing at Derek Poundstone's gym, and he's loading a 500-pound stone and circus dumbbell pressing over 200 pounds for reps and deadlifting cars and stuff like that, and I was hooked. It was just awesome. From that point on, loved it. It was awesome. Had some success with it on the local teen and teen national level. But I ended up getting an injury when I was, right after I got my pro card, so I was 20, and kind of took a step back. It was a lower back injury. Anterior pelvic tilt was causing some issues, so taking a look at the rest of my training, and I realized I needed to make some form changes in my squat, bench, and deadlift. So I started looking up videos on YouTube, trying to refine my form, and that's when I came across Dan Green, his videos. And I had never seen anybody around the body weight that I was at moving that kind of weight. So I kind of thought to myself, you know, instead of just focusing on the wide variety of lifts that are in Strongman and the wide variety of strength challenges there are, what could I do if I only focused on 3 things? Before I decided to compete in anything, my first competition was when I was 16 years old, I believe. I was actually really interested in powerlifting. I was reading, elitefts a lot. I was reading a lot of website articles. But at the time, multiply powerlifting was in its prime. And I was a young kid. I really didn't have the money to afford the gear, and I kind of didn't understand what it was all about, and it really just didn't appeal to me. I wasn't aware of any raw competitions being offered. So when my buddy suggested that I checked out Derek Poundstone's Strongman gym, I was kind of like, what the heck, give it a shot. And I found it really appealing because there was a lot of exercise variety and variety in competitions. And all I really needed to show up was with my belt. So it was more of an easy transition for me. But transitioning from Strongman into powerlifting, aside from getting hurt and reevaluating my form, I felt like towards the end of my Strongman career, and again, I feel like a lot of this is my fault. I'm not trying to say this is the rule for everybody because I was doing my own programming, but there's so many different tests of strength and endurance in Strongman that it's very hard to train for a contest and not overtrain. So for example, like you've got a max event, you've got a rep event, you've got a speed event, you got an endurance event, and you've got a loading event all in the same show. Unless you're gonna be training from this show super far out, which most people aren't. It's very hard to train all of those different energy systems and those demands for that show and not overtrain. So I did a bunch of shows as I was trying to get my pro card back to back. And aside from getting hurt, I just had a general sense of being beat up and fried until the end of it. So when I transitioned to powerlifting, I felt like managing my fatigue, my training fatigue rather, was a lot easier to do because you're only focusing on 3 things. It's for a max. Farther out from a meet, you're hitting reps and you're building muscle, honing in technique, and then closer to the meet, you drop the volume and try to focus on testing the strength that you've built in the off season through reps. So I felt like it was a much more simple approach to wrap my head around as a trainee. And I've really enjoyed just focusing on 3 things and learning to master them. So past programming I've used, when I was doing Strongman, I was basically just doing pretty simple 5-3-1 setup for the static events. And for the moving events and the loading events and stuff like that, I was doing kind of a cube setup, which I didn't really know what that was at the time, but I figured I'll do 1 week of speed. So it's like with the yoke carry, I'll do, if my best yoke attempt was like 900 pounds for 50 feet or something like that, I would do 500 for multiple sets of 50 feet, but higher volume, like 8 to 12 runs. Then I'd have more of a almost a rep day where I'd up the weight a little bit, but make the distance a little bit longer. And then I'd have a max day where, you know, shorter distances, 1, maybe 2 sets, and then just all out heavy, short distance. When I came over from Strongman to powerlifting, I really needed to do a higher volume program to wire in those motor patterns, because when I was a Strongman rather, I really wouldn't back squat that much. It was mostly front squatting. Bench was a complete afterthought. I didn't really bench at all for Strongman rather. I would lay down on the bench and just do some close grip, but in terms of like setting up and how to program it, I had no idea. So that was a pretty steep learning curve for me. And the deadlift, I actually had to learn to deadlift without straps. And it wasn't so much a grip issue, but when you're deadlifting double overhand, when you're trying to go to mixed grip, the mechanics of the pull completely change. So that was a big learning curve for me as well. The program I used to come from Strongman to powerlifting was a block periodization type program. Tons and tons of volume, but I'd only, on the main lifts, work in like triples, doubles, like that, but anywhere from 8 to 12 sets on the main lifts. And that really helped me develop my motor patterns to be able to fire more efficiently and learn how to execute the power lifts as correctly as possible and get the most weight out of them instead of just like an afterthought, being accessory movements for my Strongman. That served me well for a while. Right now I've been working with my coach and very good friend Mike Mastel for like 2 years now. Me and Mike have a pretty good background because we both started training Strongman together about the same time. So he's seen me develop over the course of many years in person. So if, you know, I know my body the best, but I would say Mike has to be a very close second. So we've been, during meet preps, we typically follow like a linear setup. We push the volume, lighter weight, far out from the meet, get closer to the meet, obviously. Drop the reps, drop the volume. Pretty simple stuff. So I just came off the XBC finals at the Arnold Classic. Had a pretty good meet. I won the meet, but I noticed there was a lot of things I needed to improve on in terms of my technique on all 3 lifts, but that goes for any powerlifter. And I also want to move up a weight class as well. I think it's time. I think the cut is becoming too much. So I'm going to be competing at Boss of Bosses August 20th in the 242s for the first time. I'm really looking forward to that, and just continuing to refine my technique with my new leverages with the weight I get. Right now, what we're doing to transition from my recent Arnold Classic prep to Boss of Bosses in August is we're pretty much just laying off of lifting heavy right now, because I'm about to jump into 2 preps that were pretty close being back to back. I only have about 10 weeks of off season in between the 2. So right now we're just doing a lot of bodybuilding stuff, like pre-exhausting the main movement, a lot more emphasis on accessory exercises I'm really not hitting during meet prep, training smaller muscles, stuff like that. And just keeping the barbell work light, working technique. And you know, we're gonna do the barbell lifting heavier during meet prep that's coming up soon. I'm just trying to save my joints right now and keep the motivation high and kind of change things up.
I probably got a screw loose or 2, or maybe 3 or 4 of them. Some fell out and hit the floor. All I know is ever since my fucking head hit the snowbank, I've been a little